Dear friends, welcome to our channel. We are delighted to share with you different stories of love and betrayal from around the world. Let's begin our story journey today. Mateo Rojas stood in the center of the empty living room, the family portrait hanging on the wall like a caricature. In the photo, he stood beside his wife Valentina, his hand resting on their daughter Lucia's shoulder, all three faces radiating happiness. Now, that smile stung his eyes. The judge has made his ruling, Mr. Rojas. The lawyer's voice echoed in his ears. Are you sure you want to give up all your rights? Including visitation rights? Yes, I'm certain, Mateo heard himself say, his voice so calm it felt foreign even to him. That was a week ago. Today, he was moving the last box of personal belongings out of the home he had lived in for 25 years. 25 years of marriage, like a carefully constructed bridge that had withstood storms for a quarter century, finally collapsing in a tempest he never saw coming. Mateo and Valentina's story began at a literature lecture at the University of Buenos Aires. As an engineering student, Mateo rarely ventured to the literature department, but that day, a friend dragged him to a lecture about Borges. Valentina sat beside him, and when Mateo scratched his head over a complex literary question, she quietly explained it to him. You know, bridges and poetry aren't so different, she later told him. Both use the most refined structures to express the most complex thoughts. This ability to connect two completely different worlds fascinated Mateo. They began dating, strolling through Argentina's colorful summer nights, discussing dreams and futures. Valentina's passion for literature infected Mateo, while his rigorous analysis of architecture and structure showed Valentina another side of the world. After graduation, Mateo joined an engineering firm, while Valentina taught at several high schools while pursuing her doctorate. When they married, they promised to build a family with both solid foundations and artistic sensibility. When Lucia was born, that promise seemed perfectly fulfilled. Mateo remembered Valentina holding newborn Lucia, softly saying, "Look, she has your eyes and my nose. We've created a perfect combination." As the years passed, Mateo gradually distinguished himself in the engineering field. He managed multiple infrastructure projects across Argentina, from rural water systems to urban overpasses, his designs known for safety and innovation. He always made sure to be home for dinner, attended Lucia's school events, and took the family on weekend trips to Patagonia or Iguazu Falls. He wasn't perfect, sometimes distracted by work pressures, but he was never a workaholic. Valentina had her own achievements. After earning her doctorate, she became a literature professor at the University of Buenos Aires, publishing numerous research papers on modern Latin American literature. She loved teaching, and students appreciated her lively classroom style. Lucia grew up in this intellectual household, inheriting her father's analytical ability and her mother's literary talent. She chose to study journalism, hoping to change the world with words. From the outside, the Rojas family was a model of success, an accomplished father, erudite mother, and intelligent, independent daughter. However, beneath the surface, subtle cracks had begun to form. Mateo first noticed the change after their 23rd wedding anniversary. Valentina began frequently attending academic conferences and literary salons, sometimes returning home late at night. She bought new clothes, changed her hairstyle, and started wearing perfume Mateo had never seen before. "You look different," Mateo commented one evening. "Is there a special reason?" Valentina adjusted her hair, looking in the mirror. "I just felt it was time to refresh myself." A woman doesn't need a special reason to rejuvenate herself, right? Mateo smiled, but felt an inexplicable unease. Valentina used to share every thought, every decision with him. Now, she seemed to be building a world he couldn't enter. The changes weren't just external. Valentina began showing boredom with their daily life. "We always do the same things," she complained. "The same restaurants, the same friends, the same conversations. Don't you think life should have more possibilities?" Mateo tried to understand her feelings. He suggested new vacation destinations, trying new restaurants, even considering moving to a new part of the city. Valentina would brighten temporarily, but soon fall back into dissatisfaction. She started spending more time staring at her phone screen, her lips curled in a smile Mateo hadn't seen in a long time. The catalyst for change appeared on an ordinary Wednesday. Valentina excitedly announced that an internationally renowned architect would be giving a series of lectures at the university. Eduardo Montenegro, she said, her eyes sparkling with an unusual light. He's designed landmark buildings globally and has returned to Argentina to oversee a new cultural center project. Mateo nodded, supporting his wife's professional enthusiasm. Sounds interesting. What are his lectures about? He'll explore how architecture influences literary creative spaces, Valentina explained, her voice carrying an emotion Mateo couldn't identify. Actually, we knew each other in the past. Really? Mateo looked up. Yes, in university. We had a brief relationship before he won a scholarship to Europe. That was long before I met you. Though Valentina tried to appear casual, Mateo noticed how her fingers lightly tapped the table, a habit when she was nervous. But he didn't probe further, only saying, "What a coincidence. It must be an interesting reunion." Eduardo Montenegro's appearance was like a hurricane, quickly changing the family atmosphere. At first, Valentina claimed she was only helping coordinate the lecture series. Then, she began mentioning that Eduardo needed to understand local historical context to perfect his design. Soon, her late returns became more frequent, her explanations more vague. "Things at the college," she would say ambiguously. "You know how complicated these projects can be." Mateo believed her, until one evening when he accidentally saw a message notification flashing on her phone. "I miss your touch tonight. Meet at the usual place tomorrow afternoon." The sender was EM. Mateo felt nauseated. He didn't mention the message but began noticing more details. Valentina's phone suddenly had a new password. She started bringing clothes to change at her university office, claiming it was convenient for evening events. Her office hours became irregular, unpredictable. As an engineer, Mateo was accustomed to collecting data and analyzing patterns. He began marking on his calendar the dates Valentina came home late, noting how often she mentioned Eduardo, observing her mood fluctuations. The pattern became clear and painful. His wife was dating her ex. Mateo could have confronted her immediately, but his professional training told him he needed more evidence. He didn't hire a private investigator or follow her. That wasn't his style. Instead, he used his professional network. The Cultural Center project Eduardo was leading needed engineering consultants, and Mateo's company was a leader in the field. Through a series of seemingly unrelated professional meetings, Mateo had opportunities to observe Eduardo and Valentina's interactions in professional settings. What he saw broke his heart. Even in a room full of professionals, their intimacy was undeniable. After one meeting, he saw them saying goodbye in the parking lot, but Eduardo's hand lingered too long in Valentina's, their eye contact too intense. Final confirmation came from Valentina's own carelessness. One evening, she claimed to be attending an emergency faculty meeting, but Mateo happened to know the literature department dean's wife, and in a chance supermarket encounter, learned there was no meeting that night. When Valentina returned home late, Mateo sat in the darkened living room with 2 glasses of red wine. "How was your meeting?" he asked calmly. Valentina paused, then nodded. "Good. We resolved the scheduling conflict." Mateo pushed a glass of wine toward her. "Interesting, because I ran into Maria Gonzalez today, and she said there was no faculty meeting tonight." Valentina's expression changed. She didn't immediately deny it, which gave Mateo a twinge of relief amid the shock. At least she wouldn't continue lying. "We need to talk," Valentina finally said, her voice low but firm. The conversation that followed lasted all night, revealing everything Mateo had feared, and worse. "Eduardo has always been the what-if in my life," Valentina admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "What if he hadn't left Argentina? What if we had a real chance together? I've lived with this question for 25 years. Did you ever have these doubts about our marriage?" Mateo asked, his voice hoarse with pain. "No, not at first. I loved you, Mateo, and I still love you in some way. But since Eduardo returned, I feel like I've found a missing part of myself." "So you had an affair," Mateo stated, not asking. "I wouldn't call it an affair," Valentina objected. "It's something deeper than that. It's destiny giving us a second chance. He's my true love, Mateo. We just met at the wrong time, and now the timing is finally right." Mateo felt dizzy, like standing on a bridge of his own design, suddenly discovering the structure was damaged and could collapse at any moment. "What about Lucia?" he asked. "What about our family?" What about 25 years of life together? Lucia is an adult, Valentina said. She'll understand. As for our life, Matteo, you're a good man, an excellent husband and father. But I can't keep deceiving myself. I want more, I need more. Matteo stared at his wine glass, his thoughts racing. He remembered their trips to Patagonia, Valentina dancing on the plateau, laughing that this was when she felt most free. He recalled the strength of her grip on his hand when Lucia was born, the countless ordinary but precious nights they spent together. All these memories now redefined as not good enough. I need time to think, he finally said. Valentina nodded. I understand. But I've made my decision, Matteo. I want to be with Eduardo. Valentina wasted no time telling Lucia the news. Matteo returned home to find his daughter sitting in the kitchen, her eyes red and swollen. Mom told me about Eduardo, Lucia said, her voice trembling. She said you're getting divorced. Matteo carefully sat across from her. What exactly did she tell you? Lucia took a deep breath. She said she met her true love, someone she knew when she was young, but fate separated them. Now he's back, and it's a second chance. She said she doesn't want to hurt you, but she must follow her heart. Matteo nodded, trying to hide his pain. What do you think? Lucia bit her lip, a habit she'd had since childhood. Honestly, Dad, I was angry at first. But then Mom showed me the letters Eduardo wrote her. They were so beautiful, about how he carried her photo around the world for 25 years, how he wished she was by his side every time he saw something beautiful. She paused. He's her true love, Dad. I know it's hard to accept, but if someone finds their true love, shouldn't they be together? Matteo felt a pang, not only because his daughter seemed to be taking Valentina's side, but because Eduardo's romantic story sounded so deliberately crafted. Carrying her photo for 25 years? Thinking of her at every beautiful sight? This Hollywood-style romance was far from reality. But he didn't express these thoughts. Love is complicated, Lucia, he simply said calmly. Sometimes what we think is love is actually something else. That's what I don't understand, Lucia frowned. Mom says you're always like this, reducing everything to practical perspectives. She says you never understood romantic passion. Matteo felt a flash of anger but suppressed it. That's your mother's perspective. I have my own views, but I won't put you in the middle between us. Dad, I love you. Lucia reached out to hold his hand. But I also want Mom to be happy. If Eduardo is the person she's waited a lifetime for, don't you think you should let go? Matteo looked into his daughter's eyes, so similar to his own, and found himself unable to answer. His world was collapsing, yet his daughter was asking him to step aside gracefully, making way for a romantic but unreal story. The following weeks were painful and chaotic. Valentina moved out into Eduardo's apartment in the upscale Palermo district. Lucia shuttled between her parents, but clearly spent more time with Valentina. Divorce proceedings began. Matteo hired a reputable lawyer, but deep down, he was already considering a different strategy. One night, while looking through old photos, he found a picture of Valentina during their honeymoon. She stood before an ancient Greek temple, sunlight on her face, her smile pure and genuine. That smile was completely different from her expression when talking about Eduardo recently. Valentina's new smile had a performative element, as if she were playing a role, a person she thought she should be. In that moment, Matteo realized what he needed to do. Not to save the marriage, that was beyond salvaging, but for the truth, for self-respect, and so Lucia might eventually see reality. On the day of the court hearing, Valentina and Eduardo sat together, with Lucia behind them. Matteo noticed how Eduardo ostentatiously put his arm around Valentina's shoulders, how confidently he smiled at everyone, as if he'd just won a competition. When Matteo's turn came to speak, the judge asked if he objected to the terms Valentina had proposed. No, Your Honor, Matteo said calmly. I won't object to any terms. In fact, I'm prepared to surrender all rights and claims. A murmur swept through the courtroom. Valentina looked confused. Eduardo wore a victorious smile. Lucia stared at her father in shock. Mr. Rojas, the judge frowned. Do you realize what this means? You'll lose rights to joint property, even visitation rights. I fully understand, Your Honor, Matteo answered, his voice firm. I'm relinquishing these rights after careful consideration. I believe this is the best outcome for everyone. After the hearing, Lucia caught up with him. Dad, what are you doing? How can you give up everything? How can you give up on me? Matteo looked at his daughter, letting his pain show for the first time. I haven't given up on you, Lucia. I've given up on a battle I don't want to use you as a bargaining chip for. Your mother wants freedom to pursue her true love, and I'm giving her that freedom. As for you, you're an adult who can choose who to be with. You seem to have already made your choice. That's not fair, Lucia protested, tears in her eyes. I love you both. Life is rarely fair, Matteo said, then turned away without looking back at his daughter's bewildered expression or seeing Valentina standing in the distance, her face bearing a complex expression. Matteo's actions appeared to be surrender, but they were actually the beginning of his plan. He knew some battles aren't won in courtrooms. Part 2. During the first month after the divorce was finalized, Matteo completely disappeared from public view. He took an extended leave, closed his social media accounts, and even changed his phone number. His friends worried he might have fallen into depression, but Matteo had his own plan. He moved to a small town in Córdoba province, renting a modest apartment. Far from Buenos Aires' hustle, it gave him space to think and plan. Every morning, he hiked in the nearby mountains, letting the fresh air cleanse his thoughts. Every evening, he wrote observations and ideas in his notebook. Meanwhile, he began pulling strings in the professional network he'd built throughout his career. As a senior engineer, Matteo knew many influential people in architecture and urban planning. He didn't inquire about Eduardo directly, but expressed professional interest in the new cultural center project. I'd like to learn more about the designer's background, he would say. I'm always interested in innovative approaches. Information began trickling in. Eduardo Montenegro was indeed a talented architect, but his professional ethics were questionable. In Europe, several of his completed projects had developed structural problems. In the Middle East, he was accused of plagiarizing a local architect's design. In Chile, an office building he designed required major renovations due to cost-cutting measures. Matteo didn't take direct satisfaction from this information. Instead, he calmly collected it like bridge inspection data, archiving and categorizing it, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, he began rebuilding his own life. He accepted a consulting position, advising on sustainable infrastructure projects for rural areas. The job didn't pay as well as his previous position, but gave him purpose and satisfaction. He started participating in local community events, making new friends. 3 months later, Matteo received a message from Lucia. Dad, are you okay? We've been worried about you. Matteo's reply was brief and polite. I'm fine, adjusting. Hope all is well with you. Lucia seemed unsatisfied with this answer. Can we meet? I want to talk to you. Matteo agreed to meet at a cafe in Buenos Aires. When he arrived, Lucia was already waiting, looking tired and anxious. Dad. She stood to hug him, but Matteo's response was restrained. You look different. Indeed, Matteo had changed. He was thinner, tanned, his gaze sharper. Change is sometimes necessary, he said, sitting down. What did you want to discuss? Lucia wrung her hands. We all miss you. Mom asks about you, wondering if you're okay. Matteo gave a soft laugh. I'm sure she and Eduardo are doing fine. What? Has the romantic passion already faded? Lucia winced. Things are a bit complicated. Matteo didn't probe, just waited. Eduardo got the cultural center contract, Lucia finally said. But the project isn't going smoothly. There are many budget issues and design changes. Mom has been helping him with university contacts, but she's starting to feel unappreciated. Matteo nodded but didn't comment. Also, I found. Lucia paused, as if considering whether to continue. I found that Eduardo has been messaging other women. Mom doesn't know. Matteo's expression didn't change. Are you going to tell her? I don't know. Lucia looked troubled. I don't want to hurt her. She really seems to believe he's her true love. True love, Matteo repeated, a trace of bitterness in his voice. A convenient concept, isn't it? Can be used to justify any behavior. Dad. Lucia looked into his eyes. Why did you give up everything in court? You didn't even fight for visitation rights. Matteo was silent for a moment, then said, Sometimes, Lucia, the best response isn't to fight, but to let things unfold naturally. The truth always surfaces. Their conversation ended quickly. Lucia wanted more explanation and emotional connection, but Matteo maintained his distance. not out of malice, but because he knew his plan required this separation. Back in Cordoba, Mateo received a message from an old colleague. The information you requested has been confirmed. Montenegro's project in Barcelona did violate several safety regulations, but it was covered up. Mateo thanked his friend, then added this information to his file. It was time to begin the next phase. The Cultural Center project was Buenos Aires' pride, with the government investing substantial funds, expecting it to become a new city landmark. As chief architect, Eduardo Montenegro enjoyed high prestige and freedom. Mateo began passing the information he'd collected about Eduardo's past project problems to relevant authorities and media through various anonymous channels. He didn't do anything illegal, spread lies, or misleading information. He simply ensured that those who should know the truth got it. First, an influential magazine published a report on international architectural practice ethics, mentioning several problematic projects, including Eduardo's European works. Then, an old friend with connections to the Urban Planning Commission began raising questions about the cultural center design's safety standards. Mateo ensured these actions couldn't be traced back to him. He wasn't acting out of personal revenge, but from commitment to professional integrity. If Eduardo was truly a talented and honest architect, these investigations wouldn't harm him. But if he was hiding something, the effect came faster than Mateo expected. The Cultural Center project was quickly ordered to undergo a comprehensive safety review. Eduardo was forced to explain decisions from past projects, and technical flaws once hidden by his charm were now exposed in the spotlight. Valentina, as the university's representative, was also caught in the controversy. She had passionately defended Eduardo's vision and now faced questioning and doubt from colleagues. Meanwhile, Mateo arranged another coincidence. A female architect who had worked with Eduardo in Madrid came to Buenos Aires for a seminar and was placed in the same group as Valentina. During a lunch conversation, the architect casually mentioned that Eduardo was known in Europe for his charm and promises of true love, often maintaining relationships with multiple women simultaneously. Mateo didn't witness this conversation, but he could imagine Valentina's expression: initial disbelief, then doubt, finally painful recognition. He took no pleasure from this imagining, only a calm confirmation. A week later, Lucia contacted him again, her voice trembling. "Dad, did you know about these things? About Eduardo's past and his relationships?" "I knew some," Mateo admitted. "As an engineer, I have professional ethical standards. When I heard the Cultural Center project's chief architect might have professional issues, I felt it necessary to learn more." "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Lucia almost accused him. "Would you have believed me?" Mateo calmly asked. "Would you have believed someone who reduces everything to practical perspectives over the true love who carried your mother's photo around the world for 25 years?" There was a long silence on the phone. "Mom is hurting," Lucia finally said. She discovered Eduardo has been messaging at least 3 other women, one right at the university, and the Cultural Center project might be canceled. Mateo showed no satisfaction. "I'm sorry she's hurt. But every choice has consequences, Lucia. That's life's reality." "You orchestrated all this, didn't you?" Lucia suddenly asked, realization in her voice. "You gave up everything in court, then waited." Mateo didn't answer directly. "I just let the truth have a chance to surface. Your mother chose to believe a romantic fantasy instead of 25 years of reality. Eduardo chose to exploit that. I simply didn't prevent the consequences from arriving." The Cultural Center project wasn't ultimately canceled, but Eduardo was demoted to team member rather than chief architect. More importantly, his reputation suffered serious damage. In the design world, trust once lost is difficult to rebuild. Valentina and Eduardo's relationship quickly collapsed under pressure. Romantic fantasies struggle to survive under reality's weight. When Eduardo began blaming the project's problems on Valentina's interference, she finally saw his true nature. Mateo received a text from Valentina. "Can we talk?" He replied, "I don't think there's anything to discuss." Valentina persisted. "Please, Mateo, for the sake of our shared 25 years." Eventually, Mateo agreed to meet at a neutral restaurant. When he arrived, he found Valentina looking haggard and dejected, in stark contrast to her radiant appearance months earlier. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said softly. Mateo nodded, waiting for her to continue. I made a terrible mistake, Valentina finally said, her voice shaking. I was deluded by a fantasy about second chances and true love. Why tell me this? Matteo asked. Because I want to apologize. Valentina's eyes filled with tears. For hurting you, for destroying our family, for involving Lucia. Eduardo isn't the person I remembered. Perhaps he never was. Matteo looked at this woman he'd loved most of his life, feeling complex emotions. No satisfaction, no vengeful joy, only a calm acceptance of what was lost. I don't hate you, Valentina, he finally said. I've moved past that stage. But I can't forgive you either. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired. Is this how our 25 years of marriage ends? Valentina asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. It ended the moment you decided Eduardo was your true love, Matteo answered. Today is merely acknowledging reality. Valentina wiped away her tears, trying to maintain dignity. What about Lucia? She needs us both. Lucia is an adult, Matteo said, repeating Valentina's words from months earlier. She'll understand. As they said goodbye, Matteo knew it was the last time. No anger, no arguments, just a calm, final ending. Lucia began contacting Matteo frequently, trying to rebuild their relationship. Initially, he kept his distance, but as time passed, he began accepting small steps toward reconciliation. They would have coffee together, brief conversations. Matteo learned that Lucia had secured a job at a news website, reporting on urban development projects. I think I inherited your interest in structures, she smiled. Except I focus on social structures rather than physical ones. A year later, on a warm spring day, Lucia came to Matteo's home in Córdoba. He had established a new life there, managing a project designing sustainable water systems for rural communities. This place suits you, Lucia commented, looking at the simple but comfortable house and the surrounding mountain views. Yes, Matteo agreed. It's peaceful here. They sat on the terrace, drinking mate tea, silent for a while. Dad, Lucia finally said, I owe you an apology. I took Mom's side, believed the romantic story instead of seeing the truth. Matteo looked at the distant mountains. You believed what you saw. We all do that. But I should have been more skeptical, Lucia insisted. I should have asked more questions. Instead, I let myself be deluded by a fairy tale. Experience is the best teacher, Matteo said, though sometimes the cruelest. Lucia hesitated, then asked, Will you forgive Mom? Matteo shook his head, no. But I won't harbor resentment toward her either. That doesn't benefit anyone. What about me? Lucia's voice was almost a whisper. Can you forgive me? Matteo looked at his daughter, his only child, the person he once would have done anything for. In her eyes, he saw sincere regret, and also his own reflection. We can rebuild, Lucia, he said. Not return to the past, but create something new. But it will take time and patience. Lucia nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm willing to wait. As the sun set, they remained sitting there, drinking mate tea, discussing future possibilities. No perfect reconciliation, no immediate fix, just the beginning of slow healing. Matteo knew that trust once broken was like a collapsed bridge, could be rebuilt, but never the same as before. Valentina eventually left Buenos Aires, accepting a position at a university in Medellin. Eduardo's Cultural Center project was completed under another architect's leadership, but his own reputation could never recover in Argentina. According to Lucia, he returned to Europe. As for Matteo, he found new purpose and peace in Córdoba. He didn't seek new love, that wound still too deep. Instead, he channeled his energy into his work, helping communities that needed clean water and safe infrastructure. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, he would ponder how their story might have had a different ending. If Valentina hadn't let past fantasies blind her to reality, if Lucia had seen the truth more clearly, if he himself had noticed the marriage's cracks earlier. But he had learned to accept reality rather than live in a world of what-ifs. In the mountains of Córdoba, far from Buenos Aires' noise, Matteo discovered a simple but important truth. Real love isn't about romantic fantasies or dramatic declarations, but about daily choices and lasting commitment. Valentina chose a fantasy, while Matteo chose to accept reality, however painful. While designing bridges and water systems, Matteo often reflected on that simple but profound lesson. Any structure, physical or emotional, requires honest foundations and continuous maintenance. No shortcuts, no magic formulas, just hard work and sincere commitment. Perhaps someday he would trust again, love again. But for now, he was content rebuilding his life, one brick at a time, just as he taught young engineers to design bridges, carefully, patiently, always focusing on what's real rather than appearances. Because ultimately, as his career had taught him, truth always surfaces, reality always prevails. That is the fundamental law of engineering and life. If this story resonated with you, please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more fascinating content. Looking forward to meeting you in our next story.